Hey friend, today we're going to be painting this landscape of Channel Islands National Park off the coast of California. We are painting this from the perspective of a bird's eye overhead view of the coast, and we've got some of the rock formation and island coastline, and we've also got some nice bright watercolor loose yellow wildflowers we'll also be featuring in this landscape. I'm super excited to paint this with you, and without further ado, let's get painting. For this painting, I'm going to be using 7 colors. We have cadmium yellow, viridian green, cobalt turquoise, Prussian blue, Payne's gray, sap green, and burnt umber. I have all of my art supplies linked in my Amazon storefront in the description below. I'm also going to be using some Winsor Newton art masking fluid. And just to show here, this allows for certain areas to not be painted over. And it's basically this liquid that dries and then that you can peel off after you've painted over it, which is pretty cool. And I haven't used it a ton, but I'm really excited to use it for this Channel Islands painting. If you do not have masking fluid, simply sketch out some of the areas that I am going to be using it for and just paint around those areas. And next up, I'm going to be showing where I strategically placed it, so you will see that in the next clip coming up. I've also got, as far as supplies go, my size 4, size 2, size 16 round Princeton brush, and the size of the painting we're working with today is a 5x7. One other thing I wanted to add that I'm also going to be using is white gouache paint to add some highlights to the ocean. You can also use white acrylic paint as well. Just a white opaque paint will do perfectly fine. The first thing I'm going to do is just use my size 2 brush and a little bit of some light burnt umber, and I am just going to lightly sketch using watercolor. I'm going to lightly sketch a kind of irregular outline of where the coast will be. And then from there, I'm going to have a really light kind of turquoisey wash of water here. And in this area, it's going to be the turquoise. In this area, it's going to be the combo of Prussian blue and Payne's gray. And then from here, I actually want to use a little bit of my masking fluid. And I am just going to use a brush that's old. And I've got my old brush here, and I'm just going to take some of this masking fluid, and I want to have a few rocks that are in the ocean. And so I'm just going to take this masking fluid and paint kind of a jagged oval shape with rough edges. That's going to be our rock. And I want to do just a few of them. Maybe I'll have a slightly larger one here. Keeping the shapes kind of inconsistent from each other, so that way nothing looks perfectly the same. So here's kind of a larger one, and I know it's a little difficult to see, but as long as you have an irregularly shaped kind of blobby shape, lack of a better term, you are totally fine. I'm now gonna do maybe a small one right here. And again, keeping the shapes just inconsistent. Work your way from an oval to some rough edges, and then maybe just one that's kind of going off the page off to the side here. And one little tiny one right here. Okay, now what I'm going to do here on this coast of the island is I'm going to do just a few little dainty dots, and once this masking fluid dries, and once we lift it up, once this painting is done, I'm going to add some yellow in these dots, and those are going to be yellow wildflowers. And I'm just placing these dots really dainty, just using the tip of the brush and adding them very randomly throughout. Okay, now I'm just gonna let this masking fluid set and dry, and then from there we will start painting. Now that our masking fluid is dry, I'm now gonna take my large paintbrush here and just do a wash of water. And you'll notice as you paint this, if you're using masking fluid, that it'll just ripple off the areas that you applied that masking fluid. We are going to be using Viridian Green, Cobalt Turquoise, Prussian Blue, and Payne's Gray for our water today. And as we get closest to shore, I'm going to start applying in this second kind of area that we've sketched out here, a combo of Viridian Green. And I'm just doing a wash of that Viridian Green. I'm also going to be adding some Cobalt Turquoise as well. And something that I want to make sure to do is have a light wash of this color in some areas, and in other colorful areas, I'm going to add a higher concentration of paint versus a wash. So in a few spots, I'm just going to add kind of some concentrated amounts of value of the color, letting some areas just bleed and be kind of softer, and some are highly pigmented. I'm now going to grab some Cobalt Turquoise, and I'm going to add it in this transition here between the Viridian Green and the Prussian Blue that we'll add later on. I'm going to add just a little bit of it here towards the shoreline. And then you can kind of just, as needed, add a few more pops of Viridian. Okay, so because I want just a few highlights in here, I'm going to dry off my size 16 brush, and I'm just going to lift some of the pigment just a little bit, just to add some variegation of highlights. I'm just using pressure with my large brush here, and I'm just applying that to the paper and lifting some of the pigment. And then as needed, you can just continue to add just a few pops of color. Okay, so by now the lower area here may be slightly dry, so I'm going to re-wet this area with my large brush here. And just to start, I'm going to add a very subtle wash of the Cobalt Turquoise just as an undertone layer. And now I'm going to carry over the same technique using our Prussian Blue by applying some certain areas that are more pigmented than others and some that are lighter in value. I'm going to gradually add just some touches of the Prussian Blue in the lighter area. And I'm just going to continue to drag it all the way down. And you can relayer some more of the Cobalt Turquoise in this transition just to help soften it a little bit. Now I'm just applying some more layers in areas of the higher concentrated value of Prussian blue. And I'm just using the tip of my brush and just slightly applying pressure just to have some variegation in the brush strokes. And now I'm going to add some Payne's Gray in this lower 1.5 inches or so. It's going to give the painting a nice contrast. And I'm just adding a few touches of the Payne's Gray into some of the areas of the Prussian blue. I'm gonna layer up some more Prussian blue here, just going into the Payne's Gray, lots of layering. Okay. From here on, I'm just gonna let my paint dry, and I'm gonna let this set before we move on to adding some of the greenery up here, and then we'll move on to our rock formations in the ocean. Now that my masking fluid on my rocks here is fully dry, I'm gonna use an eraser, which definitely has some gold foil on it from another crafty thing I was doing. But I'm gonna use that just to remove the masking fluid from the rocks here. I'm leaving the masking fluid up here for the wildflowers for now, but first let's get these rocks, and I'm just going to rub my eraser, and slowly but surely this masking fluid will peel right off. You can see it's peeling right off, and I'm just gonna go ahead and do that for the rest of the rocks. Now that I have the masking fluid off of the rocks, before I start to paint them, I want to add some green into our island here. Oh, looks like I got some water splattered right here. No need to worry, because you could just blot that up with a paper towel if that ever happens. Okay, so I've got my green area laid out here, and I'm just going to take sap green with my size 16 brush, and I'm going to go ahead and apply a nice wash of this color, and I'm going to go a little bit slightly over the edge here where the Viridian green is, and I really want to capture kind of an irregular jagged coastline here. I don't want it to be a perfectly smooth line. And now I'm just going to take some concentrated amounts of sap green and apply some blobs of concentrated green here, just to add some texture and variety in the value. Okay. Next, I'm going to mix some sap green with a little bit of Prussian blue. And I'm going to use this kind of deeper green, blue-green color to help give a little bit of more depth in the greenery and some more shading. So I'm just going to apply at kind of random, sporadically, some of this blue-green on top of the already wet sap green. Okay, and I'm just going to let that sit. While this green island coastline is drying, I'm gonna get started on some of these other kind of coastal rocks here. And I'm gonna have the first two larger ones still be pretty green, but the other ones I'm gonna have be more dark, kind of more brownish green with some Payne's gray, because it's going to have less foliage on those ones. So similar idea, I'm going to be adding a wash of the sap green and then apply some areas of sap green that are darker throughout this area here, keeping the edges irregularly shaped with some texture. I'm covering up that bloom there with some green, which is totally fine. That's the thing about watercolor, is it can be quite forgiving, which is nice. Okay, so I've got some green. I'm now going to use my Prussian blue and sap green blend, and I'm just gonna add a few areas here where it's got some nice depth with this deeper blue-green. I'm gonna lift some of the pigment with my dry brush here. And I'm now gonna switch gears to my size 4 brush. And just along the edges, I just want to add a little bit of depth with this blue-green. Just on this bottom edge here. And right over on the bottom edge of here as well. I'm going to add just a touch of some more blue-green on some of the coastal areas as well. Okay, now for these rocks, these are going to be a little bit darker, so I'm actually going to be using a combo of burnt umber here and some Payne's gray. And I'm just going to paint this color in a lighter value as a wash to start. And while that wash is kind of setting, I'm just going to continue here and there to just lift some of this green just to add a highlight in a couple areas, using my dry brush and a lot of pressure with my hand. Okay, so now I'm just gonna mix a little bit more Payne's Gray and Burnt Umber, and I just want to do some shading along the edges of these rocks here. And I'm also going to add a few touches of areas where there's some shaded rock, and so maybe the sun is coming from this side shining over here, and so this left side of the rocks are going to have a little bit more shading. So I'm kind of shading the bottoms here, and then more so towards the left side of the rocks, and then a couple random areas on the right just to show that there's some jagged texture and variegation on the surface of these rocks. And as needed here, I am adding just some more dark green. If it bleeds out too much, just gonna relayer a little bit. Okay, now I'm gonna let the greenery just set and dry, and then when we come back, I'm gonna use my eraser again just to get some of the, all of the masking fluid off of these areas here. And then from there, we're gonna add some of our kind of loose yellow wildflowers. All right, my islands are dry and the coast is almost dry. So while that's just finishing drying up, I want to add some areas of some crashing waves using white gouache and my size 2 brush. So I'm going to start kind of along the coastline area, and I'm just going to start by adding just some irregular brush strokes, just kind of using the tip of the brush and just gliding the gouache irregularly across the coast. And what I'm going to do is blot my size 2 brush and then just go in with a dry size 2 brush, and I'm just going to give this even more texture just by doing this kind of blotting motion with my dry brush. Okay, and I also want to add some white gouache along some of the rocks here. Again, I just lay out my gouache, then blot my size 2 brush, and then I just carry over some of that texture using the tip of the brush and just buffing it out with the dry brush. I'm now going to add a bit more white over on this island. Okay, now I'm just gonna carry on just a line, jagged line across here, like there's a wave coming. And I'm just applying just some wavy brush strokes. It's going to be crashing through these rocks here. Then I'm going to take my slightly damp brush and just kind of drag some of the white backwards just a bit. And I'm kind of now using the belly of the brush just to get some of these irregular kind of marks here. And I'm going to make sure to add some touches of this white gouache that are splashing kind of on the rock, just a bit. I'm also going to add some more concentrated amounts of the white gouache on this wave, just as a pop of a highlight. And areas where there needs to be just a touch more white, I'm just gonna go ahead and add some more layers of the white gouache here. Okay, so I'm now just gonna add just a few touches of the white gouache in this deeper part of the blue, and I'm just gonna buff it out with a little bit of water using the belly of my size 2 brush. So my brush is at a really good angle here, almost flat and horizontal, as I apply just some irregular brush strokes of some watered down gouache. Now that everything is dry, I am going to use my eraser again just to rub and peel off the washing tape that we laid out earlier. It's kind of satisfying to see. Oh, it's not washing tape, the masking fluid. It's kind of satisfying to see it peel off. Okay, so I'm just gonna make sure all of this is wiped clean. So that way there's no peels getting into our paint. Okay, now in these white areas, I'm simply just gonna use my size 2 brush, and I'm going to add some cadmium yellow to all of these white areas here. And I'm just using light pressure with my hand and just filling in all these dainty kind of white areas here. And this is just an overhead view of Channel Islands, and so we see kind of some large patches of the yellow wildflowers just from above. Almost like we've got like a drone camera or something flying above, and we're getting this bird's eye view. Now I'm just taking some really thick, concentrated amount of pigment of the cadmium yellow, and I'm overlapping a bit on top of some of the green. And I'm gonna do some really tiny yellow dots, just surrounding some of the thicker areas of yellow that we just applied. That is it. I hope that you enjoyed this Channel Islands National Park watercolor tutorial. I loved painting this coastal scene with all the vibrant water and the pops of the yellow wildflowers. Be sure to like this video and subscribe down below so that way you don't miss any future watercolor tutorials on my channel.